All right. Welcome back to another episode of Tales, Trails, and Taverns. Today I've got a special guest. It is Adam with the Weekly Creep Podcast and Houston Strange Podcast. And Adam, welcome, man. Welcome to the studio.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me, man. It's nice to be
Yeah,
here.
man. Absolutely. So, like I was telling you before, I reached out to a couple other podcasters and asked, hey, do any of you know anybody who knows any Irish folklore, any Irish podcasters, Irish writers, anything like that? And your name came back just like that. So I reached out, and luckily I reached out through email as well as through the Instagram because I
Yeah,
noticed you didn't respond to the Instagram right away. I was like, oh, let me double check, and I found your email, and you got right back to me. So very good to hear that. But welcome, man.
yeah.
Thanks for coming on.
Thank you very much for having me, man. I've been really lucky with the other podcasters that I've made friends with doing this. Uh, it's a lovely little community. You know what I mean? I haven't had anybody that I wouldn't recommend. You know what I mean? Dealing with, so
It
it's
really is.
great.
There's some really good podcasts. When I started, man, there was like a group that kind of formed together really quickly, and it's been amazing group of people that I've been able to talk to and share with and learn stuff from. I've learned a lot in podcasting and social media and stuff like that from some of these people that I met right off the bat. Like you said, community is very awesome. So definitely good to hear that.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's something that gets overlooked with especially like in the paranormal world. Um, but yeah, it's the people out there that they're really good, honestly. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess let's start by talking about your podcast, talking about the Weekly Creep. What got you into podcasting? What got you into what started that show for you?
Yeah, Weekly Creep started during the pandemic, like every other podcast almost. um, but yeah, it was me and my wife. I wasn't working at the time because I was waiting for papers and stuff like that. Um, and I was like, oh, this would be a perfect time to sit down and write an album, which obviously never happened. And then, but we had the microphones then, and yeah, we
Yeah.
started off like everyone else, just kind of rough and ready, and then slowly got a little bit better over time, and then quality wise, at least, and then yeah, talk about community again. Like I've got stuff on the walls up right now that like our listeners sent in and stuff like that. So again, we've just been really lucky with the people that we've encountered on this, and yeah, it was just always like ghosts. You know what I mean? That's where it all started. Just having an interest in this kind of stuff and just running with it. So
Yeah.
and I was mentioned right before we started recording. My wife now got a much better job, but it requires her to travel like a lot. So we've had to put it on the back burner for now, but it's definitely not finished. I don't think it'll ever be finished. And now that we have like a permanent base, we're gonna be hopefully pumping out new episodes pretty soon.
That's
Yeah.
good. I definitely I've listened to a few of yours. I try to listen to as many podcasts as I can, and I don't have the time for it.
Yeah, no, it's
I
tough, man.
can't keep up with the ones that I used to listen to all the time, but I definitely
Yeah,
try. Yeah, so we'll get into it. The reason I had asked about Irish podcasts is because it's March. March is coming up, or it's going to be March when this airs. So St. Patrick's Day is coming up, and there's of course Friday the 13th in March. So why not kind of put the two together, do a spooky episode about the Irish, about Irish folklore, Irish myths, and it sparked it off because I heard the story about say it had something to do with St. Patrick in a town that didn't want to convert, and then they were all cursed to be werewolves or something like that.
okay.
I thought,
It
man,
rings a
there's some
bell
interesting
now that you
stuff.
say it. Yeah, yeah. There is like, in fairness, like I hear a lot more now. Well, obviously because this is the kind of stuff that I'm into, but like there'll be days when I'm like scrolling through Instagram or something, and it'll be some random like you know Instagram account that posts like joke memes or something like that, and it'll have a meme about like, did you know that the Irish actually had skinwalkers? You know what I mean? And I'll be reading it, and I'm like, oh no, like this is like, this actually is legitimate folklore. You know what I mean?
Right.
But no, like for me, I grew up. I'm like very lucky in the sense that we're a small family, but we're all very close. Like I lived with my grandparents and stuff when I was like very young, and I still have one grandmother left, but the others have passed on just in the last few years. But we never like there was never like horror movies going on or anything like that. There was never really anything like that. I was always drawn to it because I'd be like watching The Simpsons Treehouse of Horrors or something like that, you know. But we weren't ones to like just sit around the fire telling ghost stories. There was a few interesting ones that had come up over the years that I had never really considered even like a scary story or anything. I just thought, oh, there's, you know, Nanny going off on one again. There was a brilliant story of them all being on holidays one time in like a small cottage down in the middle of nowhere. And one of them decided to scare the others by putting a sheet over her head. And she was waiting in the bedroom until, you know, somebody came in. But when the person opened the door and the light shone in the room, she saw herself in the mirror and lost the plot. um, but no, other than that, like my grandmother again, she would be telling me like one particular instance that's always stuck with me. And I asked her before she passed as well because I've never heard a story like this. But her and her sister-in-law were walking back to my grandfather's the house where he was born, and we're from the city, like you know what I mean. We're not from the countryside or anything. Um, I actually like had friends live in the same neighborhood, like they still live there now, and the house is still there and all. But they were walking home one evening, and as they got to cross the road to go over, uh, as soon as they put their foot on the pavement or on the tarmac of the road, it looked like the bush outside my granddad's family home was like in flames. But this was like a two-story high kind of hedge, you know what I mean? That had it was
Yeah,
like guarding the thing. And they panicked, like they just thought, oh my God, like the roof is gonna catch fire, you know what I mean? Everything. But they jumped back out of shock. And when they jumped back, there was no fire.
really.
But they couldn't cross the road. She said it happened like multiple times. And then eventually, she says she doesn't remember really anything after that. She just knows that at one point they were able to cross the road and there was no fire. Um, and then shortly after that, they learned that my one of my granddad's older brothers, who had been in England, had died in a house fire. But it was back in the day when like people weren't in contact. You might get a letter like once every few
Right.
months, you know. And
Yeah.
so his body had burned all of the papers that were with him, like whatever identification he had was gone. And then eventually they just got a death certificate in the mail from somewhere in England. And it just said, you know, I can't remember now even the brother's name. I think it might have been Mihal, which is just the Irish for Michael. And it would just, yeah, he had died in a fire. Um, so like that was one that really stuck with me. And it's something that I've like constantly trying to find another similar story.
Right.
Um, but then the other one that stuck out, and I always for years thought like, oh, this is just somebody who got drunk, right? But one of my uncles was in
Those are
it.
usually the best stories, aren't they? Somebody's
Well,
just
yeah, right. But one of my the same grandmother, her brother was in like a fairly famous Irish band, like a traditional Irish band. They're called the Dubliners, and he was, you know, at the time up dealing with like, you know, highfalutin society because he was a celebrity. And so his wife that he married came from a very well-to-do family, whereas we weren't so much. Her father was like the only doctor in the town where she had been born, and the brother now is like, I think he's retired, but he had gone like he was a lawyer, and then he had gone higher than that. He was a barrister and all this, like very well educated people, you know. And the father, again, like one of the first people in the town to get a phone call or to get a phone line. And one night he received an emergency call saying, you know, hey, whatever had happened, you need to get down to the town and help fix whatever's gone wrong. Um, and so he lived in like an old estate on a little bit of land with a long drive, but he was walking down. I don't know if he had a car or he didn't have a car or what, but either way, he took his medical bag and he left the house and he never made it into town. He got lost in a fairy ring in his front garden. like around a tree and couldn't find. He could see the house, but he couldn't
Yeah.
find his way back, and he could see the gate, but he couldn't find his way to the gate. And I remember, like for years, even as a kid, my grandmother had tell me that, and I was like, whatever. I don't think so. But no, like the older I got, the more I'd be like, did that really, like, was that just a story that you made up to tell me? And they were adamant, like they were like, no, I can't remember the fella's name now, but he never let that story go. He swore by that story, like, and so between that and like other fairy tree type stories, like there's one that gets kind of misconstrued between the Hilda folk in Iceland and just the fairies of Ireland. Um, but that like the government has paid like a substantial amount of money to go around certain areas when building roads because there's folklore about certain areas to say like, oh well, no, we can't knock down this tree because it's a fairy tree or a fairy fort, so you can't
Wow.
go near there, and so they'll divert it, and or at least that's what comes out in the papers,
Right.
But it's the older I get, the more I kind of lean into it because there's a fantastic podcaster. Well, he's an author and everything. His name is Blind Boy, and
Okay.
he does not believe in any of this stuff. But he's very, very. He's autistic, and what he does is he'll do deep dives into the most random of topics. Like why do we have pineapples today when we couldn't have gotten pineapples to the UK or Ireland 100 and something years ago, and all that kind of
Right.
stuff. Um, but one of the things that he consistently goes back to is the holy wells. So Ireland is full of just natural wells where people for years would have gone and just drawn water from
Okay.
pre-Christianity and stuff like that. And then, of course, the Christians came and the takeover, or St. Patrick came and got rid of the snakes, whatever way you want to listen to it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
basically, they came in and rebranded. So no longer is this going to be Bridget, the pagan goddess, as well. It's now going to be Saint Bridget's Well, and that kind of thing. So the place was full of now wells named after saints or whatever it was. But scientifically, now people are going and refinding these wells that have. Some of them are literally they just look like puddles in the ground nearly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but they're the locals kind of know where they are and they're not used anymore. But now like students have gone back and tested these waters and found that the mineral content in a lot of these wells is a lot higher in certain minerals than say like whatever we're getting out of plastic bottles now anyway.
Yeah.
But one specifically was like very high in lithium, and people used to go there. Like over the years it was like, oh well, my sister's away with the fairies, or people struggling with their mental health, basically they'd be sent on a pilgrimage to these wells to drink from the wells, and the well will cure you. And then years later,
You're
it
giving
turns out
lithium to people with bipolar disorder.
yeah,
Like,
and it
hey,
was
go to this well, and
exactly,
it's wow. That's
exactly.
pretty
But at the
interesting.
time, they just thought, oh well, that's
It's
connected to
that
the
well
other
that
world, and
yeah.
it's the fairies. Yeah, there was other ones as well. Like I can't remember exactly, but there was one where like if you had any eye problems, you would go and you would wash your eyes in the well, and then it turned out it was just naturally high in whatever mineral content would like act as a kind of a disinfectant or whatever, so there's like a really interesting crossover that's really starting to develop now. Same with like the native Australian people, like where um, archaeologists and geologists are coming back now and going, oh, this story that's like 15,000 years old that speaks of like a sea that used to be in this place is now being proved to be
That
true
they're
because
founding
they
it.
can they're actually finding the geological proof or geographical proof.
Yeah.
So I love that, but I also love just a paranormal element that we can't explain as well. And I really feel like I'm sure like you've found this yourself now, like being kind of deeper involved in this kind of stuff, like when you're going investigating and stuff. I feel like it teaches you a lot of patience, right? Because like
It
let's
certainly
face it,
does. Yeah.
you go on an investigation, 9 times out of 10, you're just sitting in a dark room with some strangers waiting for something to happen, right?
Yeah, yeah. I
Um,
actually I don't do a lot of paranormal investigation. We like to go to places that are off the beaten trail or have a dark history or something like that, and then we like to look into the history and find the ghost stories of it. But not really so much with the paranormal investigating. That's I've gone out with paranormal investigators and we did the house that I grew up in. We went back to it and I brought a friend Heather, haunted hunter, and we checked that out. She brought all her equipment, and she's a medium, and tried to get in touch with my great 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 grandmother and see what her problem was.
yeah.
See what her issue with women were. But yes, we try not to do the well. I don't do the paranormal investigation, and my co-host, he's mentioned it too, doing it before, and I'm like, they sit in the dark for like a long time, and not a lot of stuff happens. Like
Yeah.
those videos you see when there's something happening every minute for 30 minutes, or like three or four things happen. That could take days of that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I mean,
Um,
bravo to those people, but man.
yeah. I've been lucky enough to be on a few now, like
Have you?
I would consider like fairly legit ones. I don't call myself a paranormal investigator by any means, but no, like it's just one of those things. Like something will happen that you don't really think about at the time. You just kind of go, "That was weird," and then like
Yeah.
maybe 3 years later, you'll come across another thing and it'll link with that, and that's the kind of stuff that keeps me in it. Like I would say right now, I'm in kind of a paranormal lull. Which I'm grateful for because we just moved into a new house and I'm not looking
Yeah.
forward to
It's gonna take a
stuff
little
going
time
wild.
for to move into
Yeah,
places. Yeah.
exactly. But no, so right before I moved here though, me and my friends we were going to there's the Hellfire Club in Dublin, and that was kind of our first foray into just sitting around in the dark waiting for stuff to happen. But we did have like a surprising amount of really interesting things happen that were really just isolated, and we could kind of go, oh well, that happened there because it was haunted. That's what we felt at the time. um then there was one night, it was the middle of January, and my friends, they live about 20 minutes from, I was staying with my mom at the time, and I was in my childhood bedroom, and from that window you can see the ruins of a castle. And like it sounds really mystical and delightful and all, but it's really it's like there's neighborhoods like right in front of it. You know what I mean? This is just
Yeah.
something that has stood the test of time. Yeah,
Yeah.
and you can see it from the highway and stuff. But I was looking at it one day and I was like, I actually can't, like, I can see that and I can't figure out where it is. And I was saying it to my friend and he was like, "Oh, I know where it is. It's next to a golf course. It's called Puck's Castle." So we decided it was like Thursday or Friday night, whatever it was. We'll go for dinner. My friend had a restaurant in the local town at the time. So we went down there, very hipster place, and it was ramen noodles, which I'm not a big fan of anyway, but we were supporting my friend, and it was a fantastic restaurant. It's still there. My friend just has moved on, but we get there, we have like delicious food. It's freezing cold outside, lovely warm soup, and they made their own kombucha in the like in house. They would show you the process and all, like really
Yeah.
hipster stuff. And of course, I had to order the one that was like cayenne pepper and honey or something. So I drink it again, fantastic stuff. And then we drive off the main road, and it's like instantly you feel like you're in the countryside. It's the old roads. Like if another car is coming, you just have to
You got to
back
move
up. Like,
over. Yeah.
um, so anyway, we get there. We end up parking like in someone's driveway. Like I had like an old van, and we literally like wedged our cars into the bushes, and we just got out. My friend was like, "Oh, it's just down here. I'll show you where it is." So we go to the farmer's field, and there's the ruins of the castle. Now we are shivering, right? And uh, we go in. We're terrified because other than like the bad guys, farmers are typically the only people in Ireland that would be allowed to have guns, and we are now trespassing on somebody's land as far as we know. So we're inside these little four walls. There's the remnants of the old stairs, and you can see where like the beams would have sat in the wood, but like it's complete, like there's no wood. Like this is hundreds of years old.
Yeah.
And along the wall, we see like flashlight, like where a flashlight would land, but there's no beam. And this happens like a good few times. It's me, my friend, and his wife, and we're like, every time we see it, we're jumping out, going like, "Oh my god, is that a car? Is it the farmer? Like, are we screwed?" And there was no one. And it was after like a few minutes we were like, "But these, like, there's nowhere for this light to be coming in, even if it was
Right.
like, it looks as if somebody in the castle, which again is about, I don't know, maybe 15 by 15, like it's not big.
Yeah.
It was as if somebody in the castle was shining these lights, and they weren't really. I remember them being like warm white and kind of reddish colors, right?
Mm.
Really weird. We would see a glimpse of them for like a second. And so we're doing all this in my head, and I'm aware of how nuts this sounds, but in my head, I keep seeing this like small person with like horns, right? Uh, Peeking around the corner of where the stairs was. And like the stairs lead to nowhere, you know?
Yeah.
And so much so that I remember like shining my little flashlight, whatever, going over there, like looking around. I'm like, is it like the bush that I'm seeing? I don't know what. All of a sudden, the chili kombucha hits me. And so we had to cut the evening short. But before we left, I had gone just number one in the field. But I had just stepped outside the walls of the castle I was trying to figure out like, was this light coming from anywhere? And two, I also had to use the restroom, so I went to just go pee. And in the middle of the field, now it's dark, but like the city lights are there. It was like a column of smoke or flies or something. I couldn't. It was one of those things. The more you stared at it, the harder it was to see, right? And I remember calling Carl over and being like, "You can see this, right?" Because it was literally like a column. That's all I can describe it as. And he was like, "Yeah, it must be like, with the way the fog is coming in or whatever." But it was like black. So again, we were like, "Oh, it's a trick of the light, whatever." So we leave, um, and years go by, literally like 2 or 3 years, and we're back. Me and my wife now are back visiting. We're back up in my childhood room. We weren't staying there this time, but we were just looking out over the hills because it's a gorgeous view and the sun sets like there. And we see the castle again, and I'm like, "Oh, that's where we should go." Because every time we go home, like regardless of what we do during the day, we always try and do like some sort of walk in the evening because uh, to the east is the sea and to the west is the hills. So like there's always somewhere to go, somewhere to meet up. Um, so I was like, "That's where we'll go this evening." Me, my wife, and my two sisters. And she said, "Yeah, grand." We get into the car. It's still lovely and bright out. I can't. It was like August or something. So long, long evenings. We go back. I cannot find this place. I know where it is now,
Right.
but I cannot find the roads to get to where it is. So eventually we pull into this, it's like a dip down into the parking lot, and it's tiny, looks really sketchy, really overgrown. And I'm like, well, this must be like public access to get to it because we could see it now from the side of the road. We just couldn't pull over to actually get out. So anyway, we pull in and I was like, well, look, if nothing else, we'll have a nice little stroll. We walk around. There is a public track. We can see people's houses from here. And every now and then, the top of the castle you can just see it from like some bushes. And we were like, oh, we're getting closer. We never found it. You know what I
Really?
mean? Like, and I know it sounds so silly, like we probably just had to take a different track or something like that.
Right.
But after a while, it started like it was getting dark. But like the outside wasn't dark. You know what I mean? It's the trees were so thick on the track that we were that
Yeah.
it was getting dark to the point where we needed like cell phone flashlights. So anyway, me and my youngest sister are walking out, and my wife and middle sister are a good like 50 feet behind us. And I hear a car door slam, but again, I can see people's houses like and stuff like that. So I don't even think anything of it. I didn't even stop. I was still chatting away with Roisin, is my baby sister. Um, but at the same time, my wife and other sister react like, "Oh my god! Like, did you not just hear that? Something just growled at us from the woods, like this and that." And I like typical man. I was like, "Would you go wait? Like, there's nothing even here that could growl at you." You know what I mean?
Right.
Like the biggest thing we have is like maybe a deer, you know. And
Yeah.
I was like, you'd see it.
Huh.
Like the woods aren't like they're not even really woods. It was just a patch of trees kind of thing.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, no, no. It growled at us. Like, let's get out of here, whatever. So anyway, now we had this like weird, ominous feeling getting back out. And we get to the car, we get out, we go home, whatever. And I remember going back up to the bedroom window and looking out, and I was just like, it
It's
was
right
right
there.
there. It's right there, and we can't see it. So anyway, this is a bit of a drawn out story, and I'm sorry.
That's okay.
But a few weeks later, I'm back here in Texas, and at my old job, it was excruciatingly boring. So we would just listen to podcasts, audiobooks, like for 10, 12 hour shifts. So I'm listening to John Keel's, I think it was actually the Mothman Prophecies or one of his other ones. And I was like barely even paying attention to the book, you know what I mean? And all of a sudden he mentions in UFO incidents and fairy stories alike, or fairy encounters alike, people often report hearing car doors slamming in the middle of the woods. And
Okay.
it's not unlikely for two people to experience two completely different things at the same time during one of these encounters. So I thought, like, that I actually remember texting my wife and being like, hey, sorry. You know what I mean?
Right.
I just read this and I was all excited because it just, one of those things that just clicks. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh my God. And then the more I thought about it, I was watching Hellier. Or, I mean, it's one of those things that, probably you do the same thing. You just throw it on every now and then and kind of give it a rewatch.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in Hellier, they were constantly after the god Pan. But in one of the episodes, Greg Newkirk just kind of offhandedly mentions like Pan has had like many names over the years, Pan, something else, whatever, and Puck. And I went back, the name of the castle is Puck's Castle. Now it's named after a king at the
Okay.
time, we assumed, you know what I mean? But I
Yeah.
was like, oh my God, that like, this is all kind of joining the dots. And this is over the course, like, 5, 6 years. And then, just to kind of, this might be me really going off the deep end, but I never forgot the image in my head of that like little kind of creature, like popping his head around the thing,
The
looking at me,
little
just
goat
because I
horn.
was like, with the
Yeah.
goat horns. And I was like, it was such a random thing for me to even be like spooked out. Like it wasn't a spooky environment. We were just cold. Like years later, again, like this was maybe last year, or the year before, we were in the Stanley Hotel in Colorado doing just a little ghost tour, very tame. Like, you know what I mean? We weren't like investigating or anything. And at one point, they take you down into the little underground corridor. And as we walk down the stairs, in my head, I saw like literally just a little girl peeking behind a rock and then like scuttering down beneath. And I
Yeah.
was like, oh, there I go again, spooking myself out, whatever. And so I go and stand by the rock. Nothing happens. And then the fella's showing us photos that other people have taken on his tours over the years. And some
Yeah.
of them are like, nothing, little or
Right.
whatever.
Yeah.
And then he shows me the picture of the little girl that I had like envisioned or something when I like, and I'm not just like, I'm not a medium. I'm like mostly skeptical, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I really feel like it was one of those things where it was just like the universe or whatever, just going, no, no, like
Hey,
he,
look at
like,
this.
you know what
Yeah.
I mean? Yeah. And dude, I remember just like my blood ran cold and again, it just like this thing just kept kind of clicking into place, and I was like,
Hmm.
okay, so now since then, I have called all like paranormal activity fairy behavior because in my mind, that's like the friendliest way of looking at it as well. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so that's my little weird, what I think was genuinely like a fairy encounter. You know?
That's a good one. And there's no big predators in Ireland, is there? There's like because you're saying that you heard a growl, and there's right the wolves were run out of Ireland. There's nothing
Yeah,
else.
yeah.
No
I think the
foxes or anything
wolves
like that.
were.
Even they don't growl. But
So, yeah, so we do have foxes, and but they are so high pitched, like because I used to
yeah.
get scared by them as a kid because they a lot of the time they sound like babies or women, you know, and so yeah, I mean that was it, and then I don't know, like I've never been able to come up with a more rational explanation other than oh you're just hearing things, which then I'm like just the typical horror movie dad, you know what I mean?
No, it's nothing. Don't
Um,
worry about it. Never mind the murdering psychopath with the
yeah,
chainsaw and shit. Yeah, don't
exactly,
worry about
yeah.
that. Or the giant
Which
creature.
and I have an awful habit of doing that as well, which I try not to,
Yeah.
but it's me trying to calm myself down. You know what I mean?
Well, it's funny. I've got a 10-year-old son, and anytime he brings up seeing something or something's weird or something's off, I'm always like, it's nothing. The house settles. House makes noises. Shadows do. I'm constantly like, I will just say it's absolutely nothing, and in the back of my mind, like, is it a ghost? Like, is it a haunting? Is it a creature? Is it a cryptid? Like, is it something weird?
Yeah,
And I'm telling him like, nah, that stuff doesn't exist. You're fine.
yeah, no, that's it. And like the more I, the longer I sit with this kind of stuff, like I've had more and more experiences, especially in the last year or so,
Yeah.
uh, going around with Houston Strange and stuff like that, which I really wasn't expecting. Like I caught a lot of the places that I'll go to, I'm not investigating, but while I'm there, I try and just get some nice, like, cinematic B-roll shots or
Right.
whatever. And I was at the Victoria's Black Swan Inn in San Antonio with Curious Twins Paranormal, Fred and Steve. They're like absolute sweethearts. Um, it wasn't even supposed to be at that location that night. It was a long day, a lot of driving, a lot of rearranging. And so it's like 2 or 3 in the morning, and I'm like, right, well, look, I'm here. I'm going to go try and do the best job that I can, getting just extra shots. And it was only like later on in reviewing the footage, like I caught a completely, well, it wasn't EVP, but it sounds like it's not a whisper or anything like that. It was just clear as day. Something just said the word memory, literally in that cadence, and I didn't hear it at the time. I wasn't provoking. I was just walking through. Um, but again, it's like I didn't jump out of my skin when I was reviewing the footage or anything. Now I'm just kind of going, that's really interesting. What was it? You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now again, in saying that, if something happened right now in the house, I would jump out of my skin, you know? But it's opening more kind of doors to like just the weirder stuff, I think.
Yeah. So, when you tell the stories on your podcast, you do a lot more research. Is it something that you go check the places out? Do you do a lot of that too? I'm sure with Houston Strange you do.
Yeah, with Houston Strange, it was kind of like just a very selfish little endeavor, and I knew it wasn't going to be like a weekly thing because one, I had to find the people who are willing to participate, and two, I wanted to make sure that I wasn't just taking their stories and but like and that was it. You know what I mean? As much as I
Yeah.
love a good story, I wanted to kind of bounce it back and forth. So yeah, luckily, the first case or case that I did was a guy who owns a couple of houses up on um, it's the folklore is it's known as the Black Hope Cemetery. It was on Unsolved Mysteries and stuff like that years ago. Um, but he has been having weird stuff happening, and as recently as like 2017, they were finding human remains in backyards, stuff like that. So for that, I took his experiences. I went into the actual folklore, like reading through old maps and stuff like that to see where this cemetery might have been, and was able to debunk it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I wasn't debunking the experiences that people are having. I was just saying, no, look, this is a legend in the most purest legend form that we can have, and we can like see, um, where it would have started, because it was supposed to be a freed slaves graveyard, back after like the emancipation and stuff like that. But there's actually a freed settlement just like 2 or 3 miles down the road that's still like an active community and stuff like that. And they kind of just took a little bit of this story, a little bit of that story, and then mashed it together. And then
Yeah.
Unsolved Mysteries came out, and they were kind of the main source, like in the 90s. And then I think Oprah or something like that did a spot on it. But at the end of because it ended up being like 3 episodes, and I met some of the neighbors and stuff and went to their houses. And I was like, but at the end of the day, regardless of how this story came about, these people are still finding human remains in their backyards, and
Yeah.
they're still experiencing really weird, a lot of the times kind of darker stuff.
Yeah.
Um, and then I've made friends. There was a kind of local Houston legend. He had owned a store in the Heights area, which is like a very trendy area of Houston. And unfortunately, it got burned down in 2019. But it was an oddities and curiosities shop. He used to make a lot of the stuff himself, and he's just an absolutely gorgeous human being. But after the shop burned down, he bought a Victorian mansion about an hour from Houston. And I reached out to him before I had even put together my first episode, and I was like, "Look, I know this is a long shot." Uh, I gave him the whole sob story. It was like me, and it was true. But me and my wife, before I moved here, like every time I would come visit, we would go to his store. This ring actually that I'm wearing is from his store, like that kind of stuff. And like within an hour, he like messaged me back, and he was like, "Yep, come for tea. Bring your wife. We'll sit down." Um, and so yeah, like that interview took place in his house. And then like we've since been back for like Valentine's burlesque nights and stuff like that. Like we're
Nice.
just friends
Nice.
now. And then the big episode that like TikTok liked this year was Galveston. And so again, it was just kind of reaching out aimlessly to people that I thought might be cool to have on the show. And I was lucky enough to get invited down, and we sat in what's called the Hutchins Seeley building, and we did the interview there for the first episode. And as I'm there doing the interview, Jin, her name is, she's a tour guide in Galveston. She was like, "This was a morgue," and I was like, "Oh, like in the back of the building?" She was like, "No, this whole floor
Right.
at one point was the morgue because of this huge storm." Um, and then, like a few months later, I got to go back down and sit in the most haunted room of the Galvez and do the interview there. And
Oh wow.
here's a funny little story. Talk about being patient and stuff. And I promise we'll get back to Ireland in a second. Um, but when I sat down to do the interview in the Galvez, I think it's like room 504 or something. Um, Again, I'm not expecting anything. I'm like in a panic because I'm like trying to make it look somewhat nice, you know what I mean? And so we're getting set up, and I hear something in the bathroom of the hotel room. Nothing crazy or anything, but I just like heard it, and I pointed it out to Melissa. She
Hmm.
was like getting herself settled at the edge of the bed for the interview, and she was like, "No, no, no, it was in the hallway." And I was like standing, like I could see the bathroom door. Like sometimes you just know where the sound comes from, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, well, I'm not going to argue with the lady. She works here, you know what I mean? She's used to the noises. And then maybe 6 months later, um, I was actually filming an investigation with the Parapeculiar guys at brilliant old hotel. It's called the Old Park Hotel, about 6 hours from Houston. And it was really nice because I was just filming. So I didn't have to worry about, asking questions or anything. Like I was just
Yeah.
trailing along. But we happened to get talking, and I said, "Oh yeah, I was, in the Galvez. I didn't get to spend the night, blah blah blah." And they go, we had somebody knock on the door in the bathroom when we were there
Oh,
in that room.
yeah.
So they had like booked the room for the night and they were staying. And I think they were like doing like an Instagram live or something like that, sitting on the
Mm,
bed. And all of a sudden they heard this bang on the door. And they assumed it was the main door into the room and like they were being too loud. So they opened the door, nobody there.
yeah.
And it was only a couple of hours later that they, like, one of them closed the bathroom door or did something, and they realized that was the sound that they had actually heard. And I was like, that is wild. You know what I mean? Just the little kind of affirmation, like, you know what I mean, a few months later.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's what I do for Houston Strange, yeah. And then actually, I don't know if this will air before that or not, but on the 6th and 7th of March, we're doing an event in Spring, Texas, which is about, I don't know, 40 minutes from Houston, which it's literally called Old Town Spring because a lot of the buildings are original or they have been moved, but they're, you know, very, very old. And we've got Adam Berry from Kindred Spirits is coming out. Tammy, her second name is escaping me. She's actually organizing it. Her name on TikTok is Haunted LA Girl, and she does the Holly Weird podcast.
Okay.
And then there's a few other kind of like guests or whatever we're called. And we're going to be there, yeah, just for 2 nights, like doing a nice little kind of dinner meal and getting around. So like for me, that was the point of starting Houston Strange, was to kind of just get more out there, you know what I mean? Make
Yeah.
friends and do these kind of things, yeah.
That's cool. Um, I wanted to ask you too about Galveston because that was a hurricane, right? That wiped out a massive portion of that island where all that
Yeah,
stuff started coming from.
yeah. So I think still today it's like the largest natural disaster to have ever struck, or like it had, you know, the most deaths caused by.
Yeah.
So I can't remember the exact, you know, title that they put on it, but yeah, it was in 1900 or 1901. I should
Okay.
have. I have my notes here somewhere, but
That's okay. I didn't. I
listen to
wasn't
the
expecting a
episode.
question about it. Yeah, I'll listen to
Yeah,
it because I've heard some other podcasts talking about the Galveston area and the hurricane and stuff like that. It's very interesting. I know there was a huge death toll on that island
yeah.
for that hurricane.
It was wild, and like so, like I mentioned earlier, like I grew up by the sea. So when I first came here, it was like, and this is gonna sound super probably narcissistic, but there was a while there when I was like, you know, I would just be feeling like pent up or whatever in the house all the time. I wasn't working, and my wife would be like, "Do we need to go to Galveston?" And it was one of those things where like it was actually like just to be at the seaside, like,
Yeah,
you know what I mean. Obviously, totally different
I
to back
I
home, but
I know exactly what you're talking. I grew up on Cape Cod in Massachusetts, which is just sticks
right,
out in the ocean. And now I live in Wesley, Rhode Island, but I spent 10 years in North Carolina, about 3 hours inland, and
yeah,
I crave the water. Like I
it's
would do a day
wild
trip
though.
to the ocean, like take the 3 hour drive to Wilmington or the Outer Banks, and just to see the ocean, smell the salt air for a little while before I went back.
Yeah, no, it's crazy because it's one of those things like you don't even think about it if you're working and living there every day, but
Mm,
when you don't
yeah.
have it, it's like something's not right here. Um, but yeah, so we would go down there, and then eventually I picked up this book about the storm. I had never heard anything about it before. Um, Everybody kind of compares Galveston to New Orleans. It's kind of like, imagine like 1/10 of New Orleans was just dropped in the middle of, well, on the edge of Texas, basically. Um, but at one point, like it would have been kind of the sister port to New Orleans. Like that was the next stop, as far as I'm aware. So a lot of the passing trade and stuff would have gone from one place to the next. So a lot of the families would have been like a lot of similar names popping up when you go back through the old newspapers and stuff. Which I did. I went through so many newspapers because there is like one legend of a woman who saved a lot of people, but of course they never got her name. You know, like one of those. And
Yeah,
I was like
yeah.
desperately trying to find it, but I mean, like
I think I was.
authors, like
I think I heard that on your podcast too. You were talking about the woman who disappeared and nobody got her name after she saved a bunch
yeah,
of people. Then she go back into the
yeah,
water a bunch of times, and
that
yeah,
was it. Yeah, and so that legend actually took place where the interview took place, which was really cool. But yeah, so I spent like hours just pouring through like the old records and stuff. But um, since then, we've gone back down to Galveston because my mom came over to visit, and my mom's terrified of all this stuff. So I was like, look, we'll go back. Jin was a sweetheart. It's not going to be like scary. It's just historical ghost stories on the side kind of thing. Um, but we were so lucky because the night that we picked to go down was the stormiest night, and I had my mom in the passenger seat, not opening her mouth because she, she's a real peacekeeper. But my wife and two nieces were in the back of the car going, "We should stop. We should turn back. We should go home." I'd already paid like a couple $100s for the ticket, so I was, you know what I mean. I'm like,
yeah,
we're seeing this through. Jin's down there already. It's gonna stop by the time we get there. Trust me. And thankfully, the weather had literally like because the whole drive down, it was as if we were just pushing it out to sea. So finally we get there and there's still like lightning flashing like off in the distance and all, but the island was empty. And
really,
I think there was like two kind of local guys sitting having a few drinks on a bench, and that was about it. Like we didn't really see anybody else. So we got the whole tour, and it's just up and down one street, like that particular tour. Jin does a lot of different areas and stuff, and it was like reliving it. You know what I mean? And
yeah,
it's such a well documented case, that storm in particular. But yeah, I mean, and then like New Orleans, there's a lot of vampire lore down there, pirate stories. You know what I mean? It's just it's as far as like well preserved Texan history. That's the best place that I've been. You know what I mean? It's just so rich, and they're really proud of their stories too, which helps.
yeah. That definitely does help. I know Texas is it's kind of old country down there. I mean, it's probably a lot like in New England here, where we have, the colonists came in at certain points, but there's a whole lot more history of the natives that happened thousands of years prior. And I've told other people this before. I think they were here for a lot longer than science thinks they were here for. I mean, they
Yeah,
say 10,000 years. I think it's been much, much longer than that. I think people have been here for a long time.
yeah,
Anyways, you
yeah,
know,
yeah,
and I know in that southeastern part of the United States and Mexico that the Spanish were there 100 years before the colonists reached New England. And so there's definitely some old history out that
yeah.
way.
Yeah,
Um,
and every now and then it like peeks through. You know what I mean? Like that
yeah.
investigation that I mentioned earlier. Like that was the most remote I've been. Like, because I've driven from Toronto to Houston, and then from
Mm,
Houston to Denver, and all that kind of stuff. And but this place was like way off the beaten track. There was no gas stations around. There was literally
yeah.
a kid just riding a quad bike with a like an assault rifle, and game just like hogs and stuff just littering the road,
Yeah.
like all the way where he was just like obviously cleaning up his field or whatever, I don't know. But it was like sometimes you can stop and like just take all that in, and that's when you're like, oh my god, like this is like John Wayne's kind of Texas. You know what
Yeah.
I
It's
mean?
big open
And
country
you
out
but you
there.
can really feel it. Yeah, yeah.
That's awesome. But yeah, before we wrap this up, we should get back to Ireland, Ireland just a little
Yes.
bit.
Sorry.
I,
I
I
told you
did.
I'd ramble.
That's okay. And I wanted to ask you too. I wanted to be super cliche and ask you about like where the lore of the leprechaun comes from, because there's like the whole lore of little people and like smaller humans is all over the place. In New England, we have the Puckwudgies, which is a Native American legend about a people, like a small people that used to be friends with the humans until somebody betrayed them, and then now they take people into the woods and lure people into the woods and lure people to the deaths and over cliffs and into water and underwater. And that's been around for That's been around since before the colonists got here. The Wampanoags told
Yeah.
stories of them, and then a lot of people have claimed to have seen them. They've got little. Apparently, they've got porcupine quills, and they speak in kind of a broken English where they try to lure you into the woods and give you this real creepy feeling. And they've been blamed for a lot of stuff that happens, especially in the Freetown State Forest, which isn't too far from here. And we've been out quite a bit. But yeah, if you know any of that, any of the
Yeah.
history, where the leprechauns fall in with that stuff, like
So I'm going to be really disappointed. I don't know like what
that's okay.
what's the term that they use? Like I don't know what like the Bible of Leprechaun history is.
I didn't know there was a Bible of Leprechaun.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that was a word before you just said it.
I don't know if it is either. I might be making this up, but no, it's one of those things that I always just assumed it was a type of fairy, right? Like, and I
Right.
do remember looking into it before because I was like, it's one of those paranormal elements that genuinely fascinates me because yeah, it's easy to like laugh somebody off when they say, "Oh, I saw a little person," and then whatever happened. But and I'm not going to go too far off topic, but I was telling you earlier, we moved into this house 10 days ago or something, Friday the 13th, and for some silly reason, uh, we don't have much of a yard, which is something that we want, but we didn't want a big yard because we don't have kids or anything. But there's a tree right outside this window. And as we were leaving, kind of, I think like the last viewing, I noticed like a little box in the tree. And I thought like, oh, is that like an outlet for like Christmas lights or something that maybe somebody had wired in? I don't know. And I picked it up and I like opened it and it was a like a bracelet and a necklace full of crystals. And
Interesting.
yeah, stupidly, I took it. I don't even know like what came over me. I get into the car and I think my wife was actually driving. I was like, "Oh, look what I found!" And she was like, "You found that in the tree and you took." Freaking out. Anyway, I put it back yesterday after the fridge needed to be fixed, the washing machine needed to be fixed, the dryer needed to be fixed, and I
Man.
had to get the gas turned off because the new stove was leaking. So I was like, all of this stuff had happened like kind of every day, and I was
Right.
like, I still have that box, but because I had packed, I couldn't remember where it was. So I like literally went and looked for it, found it, and put it back.
Put it back.
And yeah, so it's there now.
Yeah.
I will be like leaving a little offering of like honey or something. Not because I believe in it, but like why tempt fate? But the reason why I bring it up is because like you hear stories down here of like the duendes, and I'm convinced all of this stuff A is real, whether it's like a projection of our own mind or if it's an actual little magical Harry Potter creature. Two, like this is all the same thing, you know what I mean? Now, the leprechaun specifically, I have heard like, very cutesy, funny little stories of people like being up in the mountains and coming across this little fella like mending his shoes or whatever he's doing. But I've been in those mountains and like they're not like Mount Everest or like I'm trying to remember like the hills of New England. Actually, they might be close to it because they're kind of like low hills, right?
Yeah, like the White
Um,
Mountains. They don't reach
yeah,
much more than like 4,000 feet, 4,000, 5,000 feet. So
and
yeah.
even that I think is much bigger than like the hills of Ireland, to be honest. Um, but the thing is, they just go on for days, like it feels like, Um, and I used to be in the Scouts when I was a kid, and sometimes we'd go for 2 or 3 days along a kind of not even a track. We would just be following like the old school maps and compass or whatever. Um, and like I can picture because people used to go there for work, like because there would be like the turf bogs and stuff like that where you would get the turf for your fires. Uh, Not too long ago, they were used for paramilitary kind of deals. Like people would rush in, attack British troops, and retreat to the mountains. And when I was reading these stories of like, oh, I came across this little man and, he told me he'd give me a favor for some gold coin or something like that. I was like, you know what? I'm not going to believe this, but Like some of the stories, and again, it's because of these weird links between like modern day UFO sightings and the different kind of symptoms of paranormal behavior or activity. Um, but I will say there is a museum in Dublin called the Leprechaun Museum, and I don't know if they still have it, but they claim that there is the skeleton, a real skeleton of a
Yeah,
leprechaun in his little outfit. Yeah.
in his
Um,
outfit.
in his outfit,
Oh,
I'm
that's
pretty
funny.
sure. Yeah, yeah. So it's one of those fun little things to do when you go to Dublin. And it's like supporting local business, but
Yeah, yeah.
you definitely like learn some of the folklore from there, 100%. But I can talk about the Banshee though, real quick before
Banshee,
we
that's
do
a good
wrap
one.
up,
Yeah,
because the
let's get
Banshee
into that.
kept me awake for years as a child.
Yeah,
I usually have the book here, but it's in the garage or the attic. I haven't found it yet.
I do remember
Um,
reading about that when I was a kid and being scared of it. But we had in New England, we have something called the Fisher cat, which screeches in the woods. Yeah, you should
but
look
like
it
an
up.
actual animal, like
Yeah, yeah, it's an actual animal, but they make this
right,
horrific sound when they call. It's one of those things where it's
right,
like if you don't know what it is, like you would assume it's something really bad.
coming for you. Yeah,
Yeah,
and so like I said earlier, like we had the foxes, and then if you were in the countryside, like I mean, a deer call can like be pretty harrowing when you're a child and you don't know what you're hearing, and even horses like can make some of the strangest noises. Um, But yeah, I had got the Reader's Digest Mysteries of the Unexplained or something. It's a really comic because like I love having it here when I'm doing podcasts because the amount of times I've pulled out the book and someone's gone, "Oh my god, I had that when I was a kid too." Um, but I read about the Banshee in it, and I think I don't know. It what felt like weeks. I would go in and sleep in my mom and dad's room because I was petrified, and any noise that I heard, I was like, no, no, no. And then I had an auntie who told me that she saw the banshee. you know? uh, she was definitely just trying to scare me, but it was like this terrifying image of like the woman in white, like sitting there brushing her hair on the bridge side. But now, and it's another book that I don't have to reference, but there's a really cheap mass print book called True Irish Ghost Stories. But it's somebody who was doing our job 100 years ago. I think it might have actually been Yeats. I might be completely wrong about that, and I can't pull up my screen to find out now. But no. So basically, what they did was they went around and they just asked people, "Hey, tell me your ghost stories," and they got some and they edited out some of them. They made some of them easier to understand. But there is some fascinating Banshee stories in that book. And I think I did like a TikTok about it a couple of years ago. There was another one of the scariest ghost stories in general that I had ever heard that took place in the north of Dublin. So if anybody listening wants that book, like you can literally get it at Walmart and Barnes and Noble. I think I paid like $6 for it, thinking, oh, this is going to be some kid's book, and it's one of my favorite ghost story books. But there's a lot of very interesting Banshee stories in there, and a lot of it would tie back to like you know, when the British ruled and stuff like that. It would take place in those kind of times. So like pre 1920s Ireland. Um, but then like there's also modern stories that I've heard in recent years. And like yourself, like going through Reddit and stuff, and you kind of take everything with a pinch of salt. But sometimes the descriptions that the people give, and they're supposed to be the harbinger of death, all that kind of stuff. And then there's a whole list of families who have the name or who are supposed to have banshees attached to them. And of course, I think three out of my four maiden names going back are linked to the Banshee. So I've got O'Brien, Lynch. I think Williams was one, which is actually a British name.
yeah.
But yeah, no. So it's a really fascinating story, but it's linked to the traditional Irish um, funeral kind of tradition. Sorry to use that word again. But yeah, so back in the day, we had this group of people called keeners, or queeners, I think is what it would have been pronounced as at one point. But the Irish for crying is Egquinu or Egquina, I think. And these women basically would have gone around town. They were professional mourners, for want of a better word.
Yeah.
And so they would have gone from funeral to funeral, town to town. And they would have been like dressed all in, I think they would have dressed in black, I'm sure. But the stories kind of go hand in hand with these professional mourners who were literally paid to cry and, you know, kind of put on a bit of a show of like, oh, like this person is going to be so missed. Look at all these people who showed up.
Right.
Um, but
Huh.
the actual Banshee stories predate that tradition. So I'm still convinced that she or it or whatever is real. And it's just one of those things that I hope I never find out for sure.
I certainly don't want to hear one.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we should just I think that's about it. So I think we'll wrap it up. But
All right, man.
yeah, so that was awesome, man. Adam,
Well,
thank
I
you so
told
much
you
for
I
joining
was
us.
going to ramble, but
That's okay. I wanted you to ramble. I like to take a break from when I'm in a podcast just to be able to sit and listen to stories. I like listening to stories as much as I like telling them. So yeah, thank you
yeah,
so much
yeah.
for coming on, man. It's been a pleasure.
No, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. Yeah, we need to do this again sometime. Now that I'm set back up again, I'm hoping to do more of these definitely in the near future.
Awesome. You want to just you want to let everybody know where they can find you?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to plug the Houston Strange TikTok. That's kind of the biggest channel or page or whatever that we have. If you're not on TikTok, I'm on Instagram at Houston Strange or Weekly Creep. And yeah, listen to the show. I love hearing from new listeners. It's great. It's something that I'm actually genuinely proud of, Houston Strange. So, yeah, it's fun.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll definitely check that one out.
All right. Thanks, man.
All right. Thank you so much for coming on.